Great. Okay. Yeah. A lot of people chose this course because it's very economic centric, and it is going to be. But I also want to ask, a lot of this is going to be about asking questions and challenging. So, decision theory. How do humans think? Why do we take the decisions we take? How do we take those decisions? What determines whether these decisions are right or wrong, in our best interest or not in our best interest? These are questions that decision theory asks and tries to answer. All right? And this is not something as a field of theory of principle. It's not something that's restricted to just economics, right? As we move on, you'll realize that it's more interdisciplinary than we think, because humans inherently are more interdisciplinary, right? And taking decisions, every small decision that you're taking, even from what shirt to wear today, is a decision that you're making, and there are reasons for why your brain answered that question the way it did. And why is this shirt the best shirt to for the class? What are factors that I kept into that I took into consideration? All of these things, in the course of how economics is developed and how psychology has developed, we've tried to answer these questions. Today, on 19th June 2021, we're thinking about these questions, right? But there are the people who have been asking these questions for centuries. And there's an entire literature that's been built up that covers these ideas. All right. So, what we'll be doing in this course is take snippets of the different ideas that are there and understand if the assumptions that they took, were they correct? um, are these ideas, these theories, translating into practical nature and all right? So as I move on, let me just set base for what the ideals of this course is going to be. It's going to be a very interactive course, and I'm going to encourage everyone to what question every assumption that you come across, question everything that I am telling you that A or B person said. And why is that important? Because decision theory as a field is constantly evolving, right? If we could just solve the human mind as an equation, then there would be no issues, right? You could know how people would react. And though these theories say that people are predictable, are we really? So there are a lot of problems and there are a lot of caveats. So the way it's going to go about is, we discuss the theory, we discuss the basics, and then we go on and question them. Is it really true? Does it really happen? Are we practically seeing these things happen? Right? So all of these things. So it's going to be a lot of discussions also. It's going to be a lot of ideating, where I would encourage you to think about how would you perceive it, or how would you change or modify assumptions in a way that is more in touch with the reality, right? And then the last thing is to explore. An 8-week lecture, this is I had an option of giving a 4 class lecture or an 8 class lecture. But even if I had the option of taking a 20 class lecture series, it wouldn't do justice to what this field is about. And when you start reading, there's always more to know because it's constantly changing, right? And so I would encourage you to explore beyond what we read here, which is why I'm always open to people reaching out to further readings, resources, YouTube videos that actually explain these concepts well. So what makes decision theory? There are people here who've chosen, because they're divided between psychology and economics. And I think this course is actually best for them, because it will let you know that they're actually more interrelated than you think, and that naturally, as human beings, we can't just think in material terms. So these are all assumptions that come forward, and assumptions that are sort of interlapping, right? But we can't work in isolation, and which is why decision theory is about psychology as well, and it accounts for psychology. But does economics take inner psychology into consideration? And that's where we talk about how economics has evolved from the conventional to what we talk about today, right? behavioral economics, as some people mentioned. Even neuroeconomics is going to be something we discuss. So it's a constantly evolving process. There's mathematics here. Why do you think there's mathematics here? Could someone answer?
To
Anyone?
calculate money and like
Yeah.
stuff like that.
Okay, that's fair. Anyone else?
I think it talks about probability or something.
Right, that's exactly right. Calculating about money is definitely there, and that becomes the firm side of things. So when you look at the bigger picture, or when you look at how industries and firms and production, that sort of thing happens. So money is definitely, and calculating for money is definitely part of economics. But while we talk about decision theory, right, probability is what the component of mathematics is for this subject, right? Because what you're doing is you want to measure how people are taking these decisions and what is the probability of people reacting in one way or the other. So that's essentially where mathematics also comes into picture, right? If there are also any questions at any point in time, just let me know. Okay. So, the first question, as we set base and set the premise for the course, what is rationality? We talk about it a lot. There's a layman sort of understanding that we have of rationality, and then there's a way that economics interprets rationality. So, what is rationality for you? How would you interpret or define rationality? Anyone could answer again.
It's like being agreeable or like doing something
Thinking
for
logically.
yeah, like thinking logically.
Yeah.
All right. What is logic?
Something that
To
makes sense. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. And how do you
not get
decide?
swayed away by what everybody says and think personally what we think is the correct one.
All right, that's also fair. So someone said that makes sense, but all right, hi Vidya. But how do you decide what is making sense?
Personally, according to me, something that interests me, something that suits me, something that benefits me, that's something that is best for me. That's something that makes sense for me.
All right, so something that makes sense for you. All right, that's good. We'll hold on to that. Anyone else? What do you think rationality is?
Is it when consumers maximize their utility, like from the goods and services they get? They just, yeah, something like that. They just, like Vidya just said. Um,
Yeah, definitely. That's definitely there. I mean, these are one of the core assumptions. So that's definitely an economic interpretation of rationality, and we will get to it. There's anyone else with, let's say, different interpretations of rationality?
I think it's being reasonable also,
Mm-hmm.
doing something because of a reason and expecting certain consequences.
Right, fair. All right,
and
we have, yeah, go ahead.
like analyzing a situation and then it's like a process of making your decision.
Right, definitely. All right, these are all great answers, and we will remember them and we'll keep coming back to them, right, as we develop our understanding of rationality. Okay, here we have, this is a text heavy slide, probably one of the few text heavy slides we're going to have. This is a definition of what is rational choice. This is given by Paul Milgrom. And Paul Milgrom, if I'd just like to let you know, Paul Milgrom was one of the um, Nobel laureates for economic sciences in 2020. He won the Nobel Prize for his theories on auctions, how auctions should be conducted. So definitely one of the big names in economics these days. Okay, In the standard view, rational choice is defined to mean the process of determining what options are available and then choosing the most preferred one according to some consistent criteria. In a certain sense, this rational choice model is already an optimization based approach. The problem of rational choice can be represented as one of maximizing a real valued utility function. Big words. And what we'll be doing is we'll be breaking this down and understanding. So, this definition of rationality is essentially the economic definition that's there. And I think someone did mention maximizing utility. So, that's definitely what um, the economic interpretation of rationality is, right? Making sense and all of is making sense and doing things with logic. All of these are how we interpret it as human beings. And why is that? That is also equally important because I, as a person, I am not an economist and I don't think using equations. I think based on what is logically making sense for me or what I think is the right choice for me, right? So keep this distinction in mind. What economists presume rationality or define rationality to be, and how consumers naturally interpret rationality. All right. So I've highlighted some keywords here: choosing the most preferred one, the consistent criteria, optimization based approach, and a utility function. Why are these important here? Because they're sort of defining the core assumptions that economics works with. All right, and these are assumptions that are consistent throughout microeconomics and macroeconomics. Since a lot of people are new to economics, I like to just give like an introduction. Microeconomics is basically where you talk about individuals and firms. So on a unit level, all right, how I as a consumer would perform or take decisions or maximize utility, right? And we'll talk about what maximizing utility is also for the benefit of everyone, okay? And if there's if there's ever a term that I'm using that people are not aware of, if you're not aware of, just let me know and I'll also go ahead and define it, okay? And there's absolutely no problem in doing that because everyone here is just trying to learn and explore economics as the vast field that it is. All right. So microeconomics is basically talking on the unit level, and macroeconomics is concerned with the economy as a whole. That's essentially the most basic definition there is. Macroeconomics is all about labor and employment and GDP growth, and microeconomics is about these decisions. How do I, as an individual, maximize my utility? All right. With that out of the way, let's pick up the keywords that we have here and talk about what they mean and how they translate into forming the basic assumptions of economics as we know it. All right, maximizing satisfaction, utility. So, when we talk about rationality, the theory that corresponds to it is known as rational choice theory. Um, and we'll sort of summarize and let you know all these theories and concepts we've spoken about. Rational choice theory states that a person would naturally act in a way that maximizes their utility. So, individuals and consumers naturally work in a way that is in their self interest, and that is the rational choice to make. All right. These are all assumptions that are taken in by rational choice. So when economics defines rationality and rational choice, it takes into consideration that you're maximizing satisfaction, and you can only maximize your satisfaction or utility, which is the technical jargon for it. Utility can only be utility is more often than not maximized when you're working in your self-interest. You would rather choose to act in a way that serves your purposes or act in a way that is selfish, so to say, rather than do something where you have no benefit from, or even when you're harming yourself. But can someone think of a situation where human beings do things that might necessarily harm them, but it still could maximize the satisfaction that they're getting? or sacrifice something that belongs to me, or sacrifice in general something that's correlated with me for the sake of someone else, or for maximizing someone else's happiness, and that would actually make me happy. So even if I'm sacrificing something, it's making me happy, and that naturally translates into maximizing satisfaction. Is there someone who can like come up with an example for this entire mechanism that I just said?
Take up the first part of what you said. And so basically, if I'm addicted to cigarettes and if I purchase them, so that isn't actually beneficial or good for me. It's in fact bad for me, but I am addicted to it, and buying it and consuming it gives me satisfaction. So
Right, exactly. So all of these things, like self-harm and addiction to alcohol, all of these things, economists would not consider these rational choices. And for that matter, they won't be considered rational choices even if I wasn't an economist. But what about something that is, as a human, it's a good thing to do, but if I were to use these assumptions, they might not be considered rational, so to say.
I think charity.
Right, exactly. Charity is exactly what I was looking for. Um, Charity is something that it forms the, what would I say? It forms the gray area in economics. And there's a lot of things that you can read up on how economists perceive charity. But if I were to begin with this, right, let's not consider how economics has evolved and what is our understanding of how charity pans out in economics currently. But if I were to take these assumptions and these, basic tenets, then charity would be considered questionable, no? Because why would I give someone my money if that's naturally making me worse off? But I'm also deriving maximum satisfaction from it, right? So it seems very contradictory or counterintuitive if I were to take on these assumptions, right? All right. And if there are, and these are things that we will discuss, and we'll discuss how it's evolved, right? But currently we touch base. We set on what is and forms the basis so that we can question it. Okay. Self interest, again, same thing. If you're maximizing utility, you're naturally working in your self interest. You wouldn't want to do anything that harms you. Okay. And then the last one is preferences, perceptions, and process. Why is this an important thing? Because everything in economics is about um, how are you choosing one thing from the other. So, is everyone aware of what opportunity cost is? If
It's
someone is not,
Yeah.
it's the next
Yes.
best one.
yeah, no, go ahead. You can define it for me. That helps, and even if there's someone who doesn't know what opportunity cost, it'll answer it for them.
It is the next best choice for gone when like next best alternative is like forgone when a decision or a choice is made.
Right, exactly. So, um, the way we interpret opportunity cost is exactly like, I don't know, I can't see everyone on my screen because I'm screen sharing, but whoever answered, they're absolutely right. Opportunity cost is the cost of the choice that you forego. So a simple example would be that if I choose to buy a laptop, okay, and the other option was buying a new phone. If I choose to buy the laptop, then the opportunity cost of buying the laptop is the phone that I left. And this becomes an economic example. Another thing would be, let's say, jobs. All right, I could either choose to do a master's in economics, or I could go into an MBA or get a job, let's say. Okay, so I have to choose between getting an MSc in economics or getting a job. Then the cost of me choosing to do an MSc in economics is the foregone value of that job. And that could be all in terms of the salary that I might have been getting, the time that I would have spent in the job versus the time that I have to spend doing my MSc. So opportunity cost also need not always be measured in monetary terms. time and effort are one of the biggest components that are measured in opportunity cost. Okay, why did I just explain opportunity cost? Because when you're choosing between things, right, what are preferences? I prefer this over that. Okay, that's a choice that you're making, and you're telling them about your preferences. And every time there's a preference that you're making, you're foregoing the thing that you didn't choose, and that is the opportunity cost of the preference that you had. All right, is that clear for everyone what I just said?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, it is.
All right, great.
Yeah.
That's why preferences are important. And preferences are key. There are so many theories that merely talk about preferences, right? Even when we begin to talk about behavioral economics in the second half of the lecture series, right? It's again about preferences. What are these preferences we're making? Are we following the theories of preferences that is there? So that's essentially them. Why is the perception here? Let's just go back to the example that was here. Choosing the most preferred one, right? That is where preference come in. How do you decide what is the most preferred one? Do you always have the same most preferred one? All of these are questions that it asks. Consistent criteria is the perception. If you have a certain perception about, let's say, a particular choice, then it should be consistent, right? And that is what economics assumes, that your perceptions towards certain things would be consistent, at least in the short run. Short run is in a limited time period, let's say. Short run can't be defined on the basis of how many years or how many months, but let's just say, keeping most things constant, your perceptions shouldn't change. All right, so that your perception should yield a consistent criteria. Then we move on to process. Process is this entire thing, right? This process of what choices to make, how did I make these choices, what is, let's say, even. All right, Kashvi has to leave. Thank you so much for being here, and I'm so sorry that you have to leave.
Yeah,
Bye.
thank you.
Okay, process. This entire mechanism, right? What choice to make, what is the back calculation that I did to make that choice. This entire thing is a process, and it's a well defined process in economic theory, which is why it's important to understand the process and how we reached the conclusions that we did. So, all of these things, right? Maximizing utility as a principle, perceiving your self interest as a principle, understanding the preferences that you have and the perceptions that you have with respect to certain options or certain choices. All of these are, let's say, these are the building blocks, and the sort of thread that combines them is the process. What it yields is the basics of economic theory. All right, and everywhere you see, you will have maximizing satisfaction, and that's why Paul Milgrom here uses optimization. Optimization naturally translates into ensuring that you can maximizing the satisfaction of the utility that you get in the least cost. Everything has a cost, right? We spoke about opportunity cost. So optimization here necessarily means that you maximize the utility, the satisfaction you're getting, while you minimize this opportunity cost that's there, and that's an optimization based approach. Utility function again is pretty self-explanatory. Utility is again maximizing your satisfaction. Why it's defined as a utility function is where mathematics comes into play. That economic theory has defined equations and principles and simple calculations that you can do to figure out what the best choice for you is. And it seems very mechanical. It does work most of the times, but I mean, are you doing mathematics when you choose whether I should have Maggie or eat cake? I mean, so that's all of that is there. So we'll be discussing all of that. Okay, the next question that we have is, what is decision making? If we've defined rationality, then how does rationality naturally flow into decision making? And even
You,
yeah.
I was saying, like, you make a choice between two things.
Hmm. All right, that's a decision to make. how can you, what are certain, let's say, methods that you use to arrive at those decisions?
Probably like elimination and like basically cognitive uh, biases maybe, because say if we are choosing between two things, then many times biases play a role in our choice. So all of that is, I think, decision making as an umbrella term per se for all of that.
Right. So what you're saying is right, and but when we start to talk about biases and heuristics, um, it sort of what impacts our decision making or the factors that influence our decision making. But what I let's say, okay, I'll just rephrase this in the sense, given the sort of economic premise that I was setting earlier, and how we seem to have like a fairly good and fair understanding of at least how economists make decisions, equations, and things like that. How do you think the theory might be taking decisions? So how is the theory helping us in making these decisions? What are, let's say, tools that we can use for decision making?
I think comparison, weighing out the pros and cons of the choices.
Mm-hmm.
I think
Anyone else?
as I said, perceptions, like looking at like if you have more than one choice, then apart from your self-interest, I think if you look at it from the perceptions of others, you will be able to get a better choice on how you will want to, take the other choices. It'll also include what you want to pursue and how it is beneficial for you because you get others' opinions also.
It can also be like you can think about more like organize and thinking and defining like other alternatives and then making a decision based on that, whatever satisfies you the most.
Right, great answers, guys. And to be honest, it is what decision making is, right? So, um, the way I've sort of contextualized this is all of these answers are right, right? And when we perceive it, we do a comparative analysis. We compare what the choices we have is, and we see what is working for me better. And all of these are completely correct things. The way I've sort of, let's say, categorized decision making is the tools that economic theory has, and that's completely fair, right? To, let's say, not reach these things. Probabilities is something that a person had already mentioned, right? So this is generally just an introduction of what are methods that are used in decision making to reach to these, assumed best decisions that you can possibly take. So decision trees. Does someone remember, how, okay, you know what I'll do? I'll just show you a picture of decision trees next time, and I think that'll be more intuitive to understand. But essentially, imagine how you sort of create flowcharts, right? And you take decisions, and you have choices, and then you keep on categorizing it into what are components that make sense for the decision that you have to take. Or let's say there are sub decisions that you have to take for particular choices. So that is essentially what forms these decision trees. I'll show you a picture. We won't go deep into what and how to calculate decision trees, because I think given the demographic that we have, that's just going to be too much. What are quantitative models, right? Quantitative models are essentially the economic equations that we are using. So how are we quantifying the preferences? And that's something that we're going to heavily cover in the next class that's there. How are we defining preferences? How does economic theory define which preference is greater than the other, and what is the mathematical expression of these preferences? So those are quantitative models of where you can define what your preferences are in numerical terms, and then essentially plot it, graph it, and see where your optimization point lies or where your optimization bundle lies. And these are things we'll cover in the next class. So since this is an overview class, right, which is why I felt it was fair to sort of give you an introduction of everything that is to come. And then probabilities. Probabilities are important because they can help us mimic what the realities are, keeping into consideration that we can't predict everything, but we can rely on, let's say, the possibility of something happens. So we can rely on, let's say, um, giving items or giving observations a fair chance of occurrence, right? And that's why probabilities are important. And probabilities is something that does keep on reappearing in different fields, right? Even people coming from the sciences use probabilities. um, Mathematics, it's definitely there. And economics, it comes as choice. What is the probability that a person chooses A over B, or the expected probability of a certain event happening? Even how you estimate GDPs, right? GDP projections, they're based on what the probability is of certain things happening, and then they compute the expected GDP that's there, because probabilities help us account for this uncertainty that's there. And that's very important, because more often than not, the decisions we're taking are in an uncertain situation. Do you have complete information when you take the decisions that you do take? And if you don't, then you have to account for, let's say, uncertainties and things that you can't really account for right now. And probability helps you do that in a numerical sense, so that you can actually support the hypothesis that you have. So I'm assuming that, there's like a maybe a 20% chance that it will rain in Gurgaon today. What am I basing that 20% on? The historical trends that's there, and then I compute the probability of it raining today. So that's essentially what calculated probabilities are. Are there any questions for this one?
No.
All right, great. Okay. Here I'm just going to talk about the structure that we're going to follow for this course. So it's naturally the way it's formed is talking about classical economics. Now, classical economics is a very wide definition, right? Classical economics also is a field in macroeconomics also. There's a certain set of economists in macroeconomics who are also referred to as classical economists. But in general, when I use the term classical economics, it's referred to talking about these stringent assumptions that's there of rationality, of maximizing utility, and of always working in your self-interest, those sort of things. Those are what we are considering as the classical economics, the foundation of economics as we know it. All right. And so these are things that we're going to cover. Do we have perfect information? What are the preferences and how do we make them? How do we quantify these preferences? How do we make strategic decisions? Right? There's also a complete theory. Some people might have heard about it, game theory. That's going to be something we cover in a very preliminary basis, definitely, because a 1 hour lecture cannot do justice to game theory, but there will be an introduction into it because it's very important. Game theory is one of those things that does account for the fact that um, th- that we are humans and we take decisions that, let's say, may or may not, that have a lot of factors in play. I think that's a better way to frame it. So game theory still comes, let's say, closer to reality, not close enough, but does come close. And then it also talks about how you would take decisions in scenarios where you don't know, right, what the other person might be thinking of. So that's why game theory is important. That sort of will mark the end of where we discuss classical economics. Then we move on to behavioral economics, something that is a buzzword definitely for our generation. And it has been for a while, from the 1970s, 80s, since Daniel Kahneman sort of, um, what's a good word for it? Sort of just redefined behavioral economics, laid the foundations for it in a much more synthesized and comprehensive manner. And whoever is reading Thinking Fast and Slow, I think it's going to be a pleasure. But and I think you'll have a lot to contribute there. So
We got through 350 pages, so I'm actually really enjoying it.
Yeah, great. So there's going to be a lot of material that's actually based in thinking fast and slow. So feel free to contribute and add in your um add in your inputs. So a lot of things is going to be based on that also. Here we talk about biases, heuristics, cognitive and psychological biases, and prospect theory, which is one of the major contributions that have been there for behavioral economics, that has actually seeped into, let's say, modifying classical economics, right? With respect to biases and heuristics, there's still a lot of argument of how to accept it and how to, let's say, implement it in a more quantitative manner. But prospect theory is definitely one of the things that has touched based and modified a lot of um, financial thinking even more than normal economics. And then we move on to neuroeconomics. That might be a new sort of understanding for a lot of people, and it's a very new field. So if I were to say that behavioral economics is, let's say, 30 40 years old, neuroeconomics and how it's growing as a field is, I think, 10 to 12 years old, not more than that. And there are names, if anyone's interested in readings, there are names for the core founders, the sort of biggest thinkers in these areas, and you can let me know if you're interested in doing that reading additional beyond what we're going to cover in class. Please go ahead. Okay, so neuroeconomics is what we're going to essentially end our class with, is how has decision making evolved, and why are we, so committed towards understanding how are we taking these decisions. And at this point our sciences have grown so much that we can literally use neuroscience, right? That's where it's coming from. It's neuroscience and economics. Like behavioral economics is essentially economics plus psychology, but a lot of other things as well. Similarly, neuroeconomics gets its name from combining neuroscience and economics. So it's essentially reading, um, literally reading how our neurons are firing in the brain when we are taking the decisions that we're taking, and understanding and developing a biological theory for the decisions that we take. All right, so it's a huge field that's there, and it's predicted to fill in the gaps that remain in classical economics and the gaps that remain in behavioral economics. So that's essentially where the end note for this entire series is going to be, to leave you with more questions that you came in with, and that is when I'll know that we've had a good series. Right. I think we've already reached 10:27, so just a few questions that we can just discuss and leave you to ponder upon. We spoke about choice today. A lot of this, I mean, decision making, right? It is choice and how we're making the choices that we want to do. But what impacts choice? How do we account for social, economic, and psychological factors? If there's someone who wants to answer right now, they can definitely do it. I mean, I can stay.
I think analyzation of your, you know, um, I think analyzation of these choices impact the decision that you are making.
All right, but what are factors that impact choice? Is it
One of
just
the
mathematics?
Uh, your
major
self-interest.
Okay, let's just
From
do one.
financial factors, and I think psychological factors include the will to purchase that thing, or maybe they want to get something. That is psychological factors. And social and economic depends upon the social group or the economic group they belong to, and the financial status to afford that commodity.
Right, that's
um,
definitely there. Yeah.
fashion and trends, like the change in fashion, change in trends could possibly impact the choice one makes.
Definitely, tastes and preferences. So we're back to preferences. What else?
Being influenced by someone else's choices also impacts our own choice in a very big way.
Right, definitely. How does how do social factors come into play? What are social factors, and how do you think they impact choice? And you can take personal examples also. So I
You look
think, yeah.
you look at somebody and then you see what they're like, for example, what they're wearing, and then you're like, oh, I want this as well. So maybe that's how you purchase something, like a will, like you see other people do it and you do it, you do the same basically.
Right, what else? What are other social factors that impact our decisions?
I think social biases also play a very big role in choosing something.
Mm-hmm. What else?
The
Where do you
show.
think things like how you've grown up, what is the culture or tradition that you've grown up with, how do they impact choice?
When we live in a certain society or where we are living, it helps evolve our brain, like our mentality according to that. So according to that thing, like our mentality, how our thoughts are developed, how our perceptions are developed, according to that we will make our choices, because that is what we have seen from a beginning. That is when we have seen, like we have grown seeing. So like a human being develops in that way. That is why the social factors is important in making a decision, because it is something that we know from beginning, and like it's a human being. We don't like there are many things according to me. When someone is accustomed to something, they want to be that light. Like people don't like change. So, like if we have seen something that is going on for a long time, we would want to do that. We would want to do that. We don't want to risk it. That is social factors mainly.
Right, that's a great answer. So essentially, I mean, we can conclude that if culture and tradition and the influence that other people have on us, if that impacts our choices, then can we generalize these choices to the entire world, right? When we talk about economic theory, that's not defining different ways in which Indians take decisions, different ways in which um, people from Bangladesh take decisions, or people from the United States take decisions. Is there different theory for all of these different type of people? No, right? No. So then are we, is the theory, can education and definitely education and employment is definitely a big factor that's there, right? And all of these things need to be, let's say, considered, because we also talk about rationality, and we also talk about using logic and making sense. Maybe what makes sense for me, we have this question: who determines what is the right choice? We spoke about logic and rationality and things that make sense, but these are things that make sense to me. Maybe for me, sleeping for 6 hours is, it makes sense for me, but I'm that's my decision. Why does someone else have to dictate that it's not the right choice? I mean, sure, I mean there are biological reasons that's separate, but hey, I have to leave. Sure. Bye, Anya. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank
We will be sending, just before you leave, we will be sending across a mail. There's a short form that we have. So, Gia, can you just send it right now before Anya leaves so that everyone just has it? And then we can send a mail also. Whatever. Is Gia still here? Yeah, she's here. Okay. I think she's sending it to everyone. Yeah, so that's exactly what I was at. Who determines the right choice? Yeah, okay, the form is here. It's not an assessment at all. It's going to be an extremely fun form, and just fill it before you guys come for class tomorrow, and we'll be using your responses to make the class more interesting.
Sure. Okay, great. Thank you.
Okay,
We
great.
also have a class tomorrow.
Yeah, we have a class tomorrow, same time.
Do we have classes twice a week or once a week?
We have classes twice a week for this course.
Oh, okay.
These timings are fixed.
Yeah, these timings are fixed. It's 9:30 to 10:30. That's the slot we have for this class.
I wanted to ask if like notes or this presentation would be uploaded because of power outage. I joined in late.
All right, no worries. I will get back to you. Can you let me know? Can you let me know who was just asking that?
It's Huang.
Okay. And did you get the email that I sent for Zoom? So then I can just use the same thread to send in the resources and all.
Yes.
And Ananya, I also want the PPT for like reference with them.
Yes, I will let you know what the policy is for that. But I think we might just make the recordings as well available. But I will get back to you about that.
I would also need the recordings because I also joined late.
No worries. This is my number, just in case there are people who want to reach out for additional questions, discussions, just in general. And whoever can leave, whoever has to leave can leave. I was just generally summarizing what's there and just leave you with questions to think about. How do you determine the right choice, and why is there so much emphasis on decision making? Why is it so important? And then we have the take home quiz. So I will officially end the class here and stop sharing. I'll let you know about the policy for sharing the PPT, but yeah, I'll just get back to you on that. But I hope you guys had fun, and please fill in the quiz before you come to class tomorrow. It'll make the class 100% more exciting.
And
Thank you.
you informed about the Discord link. So like you will be providing us, or the Brooks Brainery would be providing us.
No, the Brooks Brainery. So the logistics teams will be providing all that.
Okay, sure. Thank you.
Right. Any other questions, etc.? Anything that you want to mention? If there's anything you want me to change in the
I have a
style that
question.
I'm teaching in?
No, not
Yeah.
like about the teaching. Will this course benefit like for college admissions and stuff?
Do you want to measure it on a knowledge basis, or do you want to measure it on the basis of what impact it has on your CV?
Yeah, on the CV, like knowledge obviously, but then I was talking about this.
So that's definitely dependent, right? I mean, at the end of the day, this is a student run thing, and it's free of cost, and I mean, Brooks Brainery has been, I don't know if you've seen the newspapers, but it was actually covered in the Telegraph recently, about the initiative. So that way, I mean, it is getting publicity, but you can't match it with doing like a summer course from an established university that everyone knows about. At least if the metric was CV, but it'll still be a great talking point, right? CVs only matter to the extent that they add value to your understanding and your knowledge. And if you think that, yeah, Jed, you have to say something.
I just wanted to add to that.
Yeah.
So, first of all, what I think is by taking this course, you're actually showing, especially since a lot of you have never taken economics before, you're venturing into a new field. It'll actually show that you have an interest, not to the extent that you want to pursue higher level courses with huge universities, but you actually want to start at the basics. And it shows colleges that you actually are very interested in the subject and you're willing to go out of the way and take a course like this. So, yeah, I think it is. It will add value to your CV.
I have a doubt regarding the class timings. So, Saturday and Sunday, 9:30 a.m. or the days will differ?
No, Saturday and Sunday, 9:30 to 10:30 a.m. That's fixed for the entire month.
Okay, thank you.
Any other question that's there? Thank you guys. I'm really glad that you liked the class. Some of the classes will be heavy. This was fairly light, and I think it did give a good introduction into what we are planning to do throughout the month that we have together. And yeah, just keep on reading more and have fun. All right, guys. See you later then. See you tomorrow. Please fill the form. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.